welcome everyone. I'm Professor Jason Van Horn. I'm the chair of the GEO Department. I'd like to welcome you to the double booked room scenario, and thank you for joining us for this day. Professor Stearley told me I cannot embellish him in any way, and I can't talk about him in any way, and he made me promise
he would lie.
Not to do that. So I won't. But on the occasion of retirement, we often do like to think about the history of GEO and our department and what has transpired and occurred. And so we've had a couple of these talks in the past with different variations. I would like to invite you to our next seminar talk on the 30th. Joel Westra from Political Science will be speaking on the law of the sea here in this room. And so you're all welcome to join us. After Professor Stearley's talk, we will happily move upstairs to the Dice Museum, and we have cake and lots of other things to eat there for you to enjoy, and we'll just have a mingling time just to celebrate Professor Stearley's wonderful career here. And so with that, I'll let you go ahead and take
Okay, thanks. So thank you all for coming out. I doubly thank all the people that were thoughtful and wore plaid. Brian Guerra here is taking a photograph or photographs of the entire group, and it truly is marvelous to see all this beautiful plaid coloration. It's a feast for my eyes. Yeah, that's right. So this made it all worth it. Yeah. There's a lot of people. Can I be heard okay? Is this okay? Yes. I'm not sure it's on. Pardon? Okay. I'm not sure. Jason, do you know? Let's see if there's a volume control on this thing.
Yeah.
It says it's on.
Yeah, it's on.
Is there a volume control on this?
No, it's not hooked up to an audio system.
Okay.
So it's just recording you.
I can talk real loud. I'm happy to do that. I need to begin by saying a lot of thank yous. I'll put them in now so that when I'm done, we can just kind of go directly upstairs. I've warned most people, but in case you weren't aware of this will be a long talk. I have a lot of images of friends and wonderful people, colleagues, and others, and not so friends. I couldn't squeeze in, all my really good friends and acquaintances from across the campus, of which there are now who knows how many hundreds or even thousands, with counting students, right? And so thank you all, and I owe many of you much thanks. And if you don't appear as an image in the talk, I do give you my apologies for that, because I value all of you folks. And I would like to thank these people. I'll show you a picture of Gloria in a minute, but those are my kids there, Sam, Marissa, and Jane. I owe them a lot of thanks. They put up with a lot. GEO colleagues and students, they put up with a lot. Dick Harms and Laurie Hahn from the Heritage Hall, Nellie Anderson, GEO Department, who got a lot of images for me, helped me garner images. And also, through the years, the Calvin Center for Christian Scholarship has been enormously useful to me. They used to run a series of summer seminars, and I've taken at least half a dozen. I can claim to be competitive in terms of the number of summer seminars I've taken. The Mellima program in Western American Studies has provided funding for some of my fossil work, so I'm very grateful for them. Many other friends and colleagues who go unnamed and unnoticed in this presentation. This is Gloria, my wife. She's here in the audience. She's in the back. I won't point her out. She'd be embarrassed. But she's been very, very supportive for a long, long time. We've been married 42 years now, and I'm very thankful to God for that. And here she is in the redwoods of California. So I should also mention why no neckties? You know, well, some of you know Pat Beist. Pat served as safety officer at Calvin. She was in our lab one year looking at the rock saw, and she goes, you got to shut that down. There was an open belt on the rock saw. It was hazardous, very hazardous. And so our friends over at the engineering department did make a steel shield for the belt to protect it. But as I thought more about what Pat said, I thought, you know what? I can imagine someone leaning over this thing with a necktie on, and the next thing, you know, they'll be yanked in like a horror movie. They'll be gradually being pulled into the rock saw. Here's this big blade with diamond bits on it coming closer to their face, you know. So as time has gone on, I've become more and more convinced that there are all kinds of other scary things around here for neckties, like microwaves. You know, you can imagine your tie getting caught in a microwave oven, and you have a little tie tack on it, and then it starts flaming. And Ken Piers is here somewhere, and I think he set a microwave on fire twice, right, Ken?
Not true.
So there really was a hazard there, trust me. Okay. Well, I'm starting off with this. This is a potential one that's been proposed that we're working with as a mission statement for our department. The GEO Department is a community working together to investigate Earth and its human habitation, cherish its intricate physical processes, enrich cultural diversity, and act justly as God's stewards of creation. I actually have a few problems with this, which I will talk about at the very end of the talk and suggest some modifications. But for the moment, if you're looking for succinctness, right, this is it. The little engine that could. This is my definition of our department, and I think there's some justification for that. Okay. Of course, we always could by God's grace, right? Okay. So the first bit of this presentation, some of it was covered in a previous presentation. You may have been there. I'm not going to hash on the flood geology stuff too much, but I have a whole other presentation should you want to see that. At any rate, this goes back to the foundations of our college, our institution, and the foundations of our department. And there is some credit to be due to this gentleman in this picture, which you guys recognize, some of you. This is John DeVries, otherwise known as Doc DeVries, for whom the DeVries Hall down our science hall is named. And some of you guys remember taking classes from Doc DeVries. Okay? In 1948, he authored this book. I only brought in 2 props. I could have filled the whole stage with props. But he authored this book, Beyond the Atom. My good friend Bruce Clanderman gave me the copy that belonged to his father a few years back. It's a real treasure. I've always wanted a copy. You can find them occasionally in garage sales around town. It's a really useful volume. DeVries talked about the age of the universe, and he said the universe was 3+ billion years old, and that generated a modest amount of controversy within the CRC at that time, but not, as far as I know, not terribly heated, with maybe a little bit of exceptions. Not nearly as heated as it would become during the 1970s and 1980s. So he gets a lot of credit, and particularly by root of this gentleman. Okay, so Timon Hoffman, he had a degree from the University of Alberta. He came here, studied up, went to Calvin Seminary, took a class from Dr. Vries. He and some colleagues became convinced that Calvin College needed a geology program. So they went to the trustees of Calvin Seminary and asked them, the college rather, please get geology into the curriculum. That was 1950, okay? I'll come back to that in just a minute. Meantime, these 2 gentlemen here basically instigated a small firestorm within evangelical Christianity by writing this gem of a book in 1961. They wrote it in the late 50s. It was published in 61. And they insisted that all the geological phenomena that were relevant, especially layers of rock that contained fossils, would have to have been formed in a one-year-long event a few thousands of years ago. Okay? That would be okay. It's a useful hypothesis. But the problem was, and I'll be very plain spoken here, the two individuals on this screen were actually quite mean. They had mean language and they were mean-tempered. And I can provide, and I will provide some evidence of that. Okay? They proceeded to start a scientific society, a couple of colleges. Eventually, one thing led to another. There's a Creation Museum in northern Kentucky. And I'll give you a few quotes if you doubt me. Okay? This book right here, in the preface to the book, they explain that it was authored to counter trends in contemporary evangelical scholarship, but particularly one initiated by one Davis Young, who was here at Calvin College. Okay? Well, okay, here we are, 1967. So I hope what you're asking yourself is, why did it take 17 years for the college to follow up on the dictates of the EPC, the Educational Policy Committee? That is a sad story, and I'm not going to tell you it. Okay? Clarence has all the committee documents that explain why nothing happened for 17 years. Actually, about 15 years, whereupon the EPC said, what in the world is going on? We told you to do something a long time ago, and nothing has happened. Okay? This is a little meanwhile. You're going to see these three people later on in multiple capacities. This is 1976. So Calvin now has a geologist on staff, hired into the physics department. Clarence is teaching geology to undergraduates, but there have been people that have graduated before that time. Interestingly, each of these three characters started their careers as high school biology teachers. This is Ken Van Dellen, Bob Spoolhoff, the son of the former president, William Spoolhoff, and Roger Feenstra. You'll see them again. By providence, they met up in 1967 at a field trip sponsored by the Geological Society of America. They figured at that time they were the only geologists in the CRC. They knew there was this fellow named Clarence Menninger, but otherwise they didn't know of any. So that indicates kind of what people were thinking at the time. Okay? 1969, we moved to the new campus. And this is perhaps the most fun picture of the entire lot. This is 1979. This is the physics department of Calvin College with Vern Ehlers, soon to become a U.S. congressman. Roger Grafune, Roger's here today. Al Krominga, John Van Zietfeld, Clarence, Robert Manweiler, who went to Valpo, Dave Young, and Howard Van Til. Okay? Howard is, of course, as you note, sporting the latest accoutrements. Okay? So, if you thought plaid shirts was bad, I could have asked that everyone wear plaid shirts and plaid pants, and that would be truly an eye popper, right? Okay. Okay. So Calvin hired Clarence and Dave into the physics department as it was then. They were our home. They birthed us. They treated us really, really good until they kicked us out. No, they remain really, the whole physics department remains close friends and associates. Okay? So at that point, you may ask, as I did, who was teaching geography at this time? So there wasn't a GEO department. Geography was taught in the Ed department. So state education requirements stated that graduates of certain programs had to be certified in the social sciences. And so Gertrude Vander Ark, whom I've never met and would hope to one day, taught geography for us here at Calvin College. After she retired, it was taught by a series of adjuncts furnished by Christian High. So this is Gordon Osterman teaching sometime in the late 70s or early 80s. Okay. 1982, our department was birthed. Okay, these are the geology faculty. Now we have Dave Young, Jim Clark, and Clarence Menninga. So we were up to 3, or sometimes we say 2.5, because Jim was the geomorphologist, so he was sort of half geography, half geology. But Jim was multi-talented. He could teach a course in geophysics like that. He initiated our seismic lab, to my knowledge. Okay, there's Jim. So a little note about Jim. He taught here till 1998. Some of you guys know him well. Some of you have never met him. We named our GIS lab the James A. Clark Lab after Jim. Really wonderful guy. Lured away by Wheaton College. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on in the talk. Among his other accomplishments was he started a January interim class on snow camping in Yellowstone.
You're advancing.
I don't know what's going on there. I might have to watch that. At any rate, so this image comes from our Wheaton brethren. It may have advanced itself. When Jim stopped teaching that class, it was taken over by Dave Van Bach in our physics department for a while. And Dave had his own adventures and misadventures with students. So it's kind of a dangerous proposition. This is Jim after he went to Wheaton doing water surveys out there. Jim developed lots and lots of really, really low-cost imaging equipment using Radio Shack parts for doing seismic studies, shallow geophysical studies, so people could get water. And he worked fast and furious with that. Okay, this is a close to retirement picture. I'm sorry, I don't know why this is doing that. Close to retirement picture at Wheaton College. Let's hope this stabilizes. In the, at least by the mid-1980s, I don't know the exact timetable, Clarence and Dave and Jim had initiated a series of lengthy field trips, mostly done in the post-commencement period. That's kind of gone its way as we've taken over the Montana class, as you'll see. But there's Clarence on the far right, and Dave is here in the foreground. And these are mostly people that I don't know. Okay, but this is Grand Canyon of the Colorado River, of course. We hired Hank A. in 1982 to be the geographer, the lone geographer of the department, and to establish simultaneously a master's, environmental studies. What I'm trying to say is not a major, but a minor. Thank you, a minor in environmental studies. Okay. In contrast to me, who stumble over my words, Hank was known far and wide for being the kind of guy that could compress a lengthy, convolute, intricate argument into simple, very pithy statements. Hank and I have joked a lot over the years, so I'm taking liberties with that. Okay. Okay, this is cool. Okay, so Hank, among other things, he studied Dutch settlement patterns in West Michigan. He's an urban geographer and did studies about the growth of Grand Rapids and so forth. There is a little bit more room to squeeze in down here. I'm sorry, I see people mounting up in the outer halls. But here he is studying with student Sue Huizinga using just the absolute latest high-tech analytical device, Dutch colonization. Sue now works as a city planner here in this area and teaches our urban planning class. So I think that's really cool. Okay. This slide and several others are courtesy of Bob Hoeksema, and they do change themselves. Henk initiated our Dutch interim. I'll go back a minute. He started the Dutch Landscapes interim in 1989. It's been taught faithfully by Henk and colleagues since that time, diverse colleagues, but including Bob Hoeksema. A lot to do with water engineering and so forth. And that's a wonderful experience for a lot of Calvin students. Okay. There's a January 2018 group. There are several students in this room that are that are there. A number of the engineering students I had you see in this picture I had in my intro geology class last spring, and they were wonderful people. Okay. So this is Bob's slide again, but I also say thank you to Hank for being such a great colleague over the years. And we noticed that when the Meyer Chair was established here at Calvin College, Hank was the first holder of it. Now I think it belongs to Herm de Vries. Exactly. That's who I meant to think. Okay. I want to briefly just touch base with my own career track because it starts to interlace here. This is 1979 in southwestern Missouri. The young lady in the foreground is my wife, Gloria. We're here on a geography trip. I was working at the time as a geographical epidemiologist. We were mapping patterns of death and disease and matching these to geologic variables. In this case, as far as one can turn their vision in this field of view, any direction, all you see is mine waste. It's from an old lead mining area. The mine waste is chock full of little bits and pieces of lead and cadmium-bearing sphalerite. So the people that live in the surrounding counties have a heavy body burden of heavy metals. And they have high death rates as a result from all different kinds of causes. So we were mapping incidents of death and dying, and I was starting to learn my way through geology at that time. In 1982, I moved to Utah, where I began to ponder the meaning of thick sequences of rocks. Okay, we moved there incidentally with my 5-week-old son, who's back out in the hallway trying to hear what's going on. Okay, confronted with these rocks, I was greatly benefited by a book written by Davis Young here at Calvin College, Christianity in the Age of the Earth. Now, Dave wrote one earlier than that, and I had that book too. So Dave Young's books came out, bing, 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 just when I needed them. There was a group of us graduate students there, Christian graduate students at the University of Utah, who read this book together. Some of you know this already, but most of you probably do not. My good friend Roger Congdon, who would get a PhD in volcanology and become a U.S. Forest Service hydrogeologist, was a Baptist fellow, was so grateful for this book that he named his first child Davis after Dave Young. Okay, I tell Calvin students that and they don't believe me, but it happens. Okay, so that book has had a profound impact upon a generation of young evangelical Christians who were eagerly trying to see their way through to harmonizing science and faith. Now, this department has done a lot in that sort of terms. So I learned a lot, and I went on, and eventually God worked us around to me being here. Okay, but I'd already introduced you to this fella. Here's some words from 1983, the next year. Dr. Young and his colleagues are urged to join in the battle for truth rather than aiding the enemy. Of course, you have to think for a minute and think, who is the enemy that he's talking about here? It, of course, is Satan. So I don't know exactly how to take that statement. It's really nasty. Okay? And there are another half dozen quotes like this in a little short 80-page nothing of a book. Okay? Let us not. In the first edition, he refers to the fad of plate tectonics. Okay? He took that out in the second edition. This is the enlarged and updated edition, the one that has plate tectonics taken out. Okay. Let us not be tempted like Young. Paddle Pun taught biology for Wheaton College, a fine man. The ASA and many others to give up our eternal creationist biblical Christian birthright for a mess of evolutionary pottage, analogizing these folks to Esau in the Bible. Okay. Okay. Many of you know Howard. Some of you know him very, very well. Howard was in the physics department. He was teaching astronomy, came out with this book talking about the age of the universe, and then collaborated with Dave and Clarence on a Calvin Center for Christian Scholarship funded program that yielded ultimately both of these books. They came under the influence of the nasty comments by, like the ones I've read already. There were people here in Grand Rapids who were tremendously influenced by these outside agitators. And amongst them was a millionaire, a local millionaire in Grand Rapids, who took out multiple full-page newspaper ads ridiculing these guys. They became known in the press as the Three Professors. That was the shorthand. The three professors said this, the three professors said that. Here's an example from, this is the Center for Reformed Theological Apologetics, their organ. Science held hostage, what pretentious nonsense. What's wrong with creation science and evolutionism and portraits of creation, biblical and scientific perspectives on the world's formation? That there is anything in it on the world's formation that can be remotely called biblical is a claim that can be made only on the basis of ingenious chicanery, both of which were by and large written by Calvin College and Seminary faculty, or ex-faculty, under the leadership of Howard Van Til. So for some reason they singled out Howard as the point person for this trio, have emerged to give monumental testimony to an imperious ambition to lead the unlearned and therefore credulous Christian from his bondage to Scripture to the promised land of scientific certainty and enlightenment. You can go out and search and find quote after quote after quote like this. So these people became ridiculed publicly. The Christian Reformed Synod convened a special committee to evaluate these claims. And the second prop I brought in today is our Acts of Synod 1991, in which they deliver their report, which says these people did nothing wrong. Their views do not conflict with the Reformed creeds, things like the Heidelberg Catechism and the Belgic Confession, although there are some people that try to claim they conflict with the Westminster Confession of Faith. That's a whole other story for another day. At any rate, so the ultimate result, I think, was salutary. It was good because it helped clear the air. But in the meantime, it was very damaging to the three people that we see here and their families. Nonetheless, people continued to take geology students out to take a look at reality. This is a great photo. There are people here in the audience who are in this photo. So Stuart Dykstra was, I'll go back to the photo, was one of the instigators of the Calvin Clean Water Initiative. And Stuart's here today, and a truly wonderful friend of this department and of the college, and of a lot of people around the world. This is Tom Timmermans. Tom is here today, and Tom likewise has taught part-time for our department for probably 20 years, off and on, and also was a co-leader in the effort to get the Calvin Clean Water Initiative going, along with Sid Jansma and several other local geoscientists. Okay, so they're to be thanked, and there's all kinds of neat things coming out of the Clean Water Initiative right now, which involve students and faculty in engineering as well as geology. Okay, 1990 field trip. There, once again, there's Clarence and Dave in the foreground, and a group of people, most of whom I don't know. Okay, now we come into the sort of time frame in which I have personal acquaintance with the events. Okay, 1990, Clarence retires. Some of you have seen the planetarium there, which is on display upstairs. Clarence continues to maintain this wonderful historic device. Calvin actually had a financial shortfall then for a few years, and people were really worried. So Calvin was skittish. They didn't allow us to hire again until 1992. So 1992, GEO suffered a major setback when they hired this idiot. It took them years to recover. And it's only thanks to their resilience. You can see he's so dumb, he has his hard hat on over his hat. Right? Okay, any rate, that's the way I wear it, but maybe that is kind of dumb. This is at a gravel pit south of town. You know, a familiar spot, or there are many of these things. They're really wonderful places to go and teach students about rocks and about sedimentary structures. And I mean, they're marvelous. Okay. We did suffer a setback a few years after this when we tried to actually introduce geography into the then core at Calvin. Now we have a new core now, but we failed. We went to a faculty vote at a Senate meeting, and it was voted down, and that was a tough blow. Okay. Hank's referring to my hiring there, not So that's what people told me you said, at any rate. Yeah, so, at any rate, actually, it was worse. This has been cleaned up a bit. Okay. A few of you don't know what I do when I'm not teaching, so I threw in a few slides. In the 1980s and then again in the 2000 teens, I've done a lot of work out in southwestern Idaho, Snake River Plain. These pale sediments are old lake beds. They contain a marvelous record of fossil fishes. This is a piece I collected in 1987. It's a beautiful fossil trout. In life, it would have been a lot like our modern day rainbow trout. Okay, this is former Calvin student Joe Garbini, middle school science teacher. Joe helped me in the field in this one instance in May. This day, we looked way off in the distance and there was this big orange object. So Joe took off walking. He walked about a third of a mile, and lo and behold, it was a parachute. And attached to the parachute was a box with weather instrumentation. So it was a weather balloon that the parachute had come down. It's on the box, it says, return this to the National Weather Service, blah, blah, blah. Joe kept it as a demo item in his science classes. So, at any rate, this is just a couple summers ago. Matt Wieringa went out with me in 2017, and Matt actually did a project on fossil wood, petrified wood. If Matt keeps on going, he could become one of the world's foremost experts. Pardon me?
Freudian slip, nothing.
Oh, he could become one of the world's foremost experts on petrified wood. I'm not sure what I said, but I'm blathering. Okay, that's Matt and me. Nonetheless, I've been really entranced by the stuff locally available to me, and they include the glacial outwash deposits. These are a couple people from 151 a few years ago. Coal-bearing beds down near Grand Ledge. Notice the smiles on these people's faces. That's the important point. And these stars document places where we've collected fossils or observed outcrop over the last 40 years or so. We just took a trip down to southern Indiana, so I've also gone that far south. And we find lots and lots of wonderful extinct marine invertebrates which populate the drawers of room 059 here in this building. This is a class and visitors. We've had a lot of visitors go along, including small children. So many classes over the years. This is just a couple weeks ago, southern Indiana. Brian Guerra took this beautiful photo of these limey fossil-bearing shales. Beautiful, beautiful marine invertebrate fossils. And if you cared, there's a presentation that I gave to the Evangelical Theological Society on the reality of the fossil record and what it's telling us just from a year ago. BioLogos has put this up on YouTube. So if you Google my name and BioLogos, you'll get this up. It went long, went overly long, and I made some people mad. But I figure, what's a few more million years of fossils? They deserve a few more minutes of our time. Okay. One of the very first students I encountered at Calvin College was Todd Ehlers, who's the son of Vern Ehlers. So Todd finished his bachelor's here, did some extra study, went on to study at the place where I got my master's at University of Utah, got a PhD, went to Caltech. From there he went to a named professorship at the University of Michigan, and then now hired by the University of Tübingen and is required to teach in German. Yeah. So he's a major geologist in his own right. These are all wonderful. So I know these people now. Geology field trip. I wasn't on this trip. There's Dave Young. But all these people were students with me in the mid-1990s, and they've gone on to do all kinds of things. You know, Roger on the far right is an archaeologist with the Washington Department of Natural Resources. And these people are scattered all over the country doing really neat things. And this is Cheryl Verbrie, who's, I think, here with us. Cheryl's picture, there she is. Her picture appears later on. Cheryl was a sophomore when I arrived, a superior student, and is a superior teacher now. The trips continued. In 1996, we finally expanded with an addition of an additional geographer, and almost instantly she was stolen from us to become the Dean for Research and Scholarship. But Janelle Curry is a rural geographer, and is a specialist in the way people make their livings in things like agriculture and fisheries and forestry. And that her work has taken her to many places in the world. They've taken her, for example, to New Zealand, and that led to the development of a May interim in New Zealand later. They took her to Hong Kong, and that led to the development of a Hong Kong interim. And now, you know, as from that other slide, she was hired away by Gordon College to be their provost, and is cited there now. Okay. In 1999, many things happened. So this is just one. A bulldozer operator bulldozing a back driveway for the Ada Bible Church hit something shiny and realized it was a tooth. He stopped. It was a mastodon tooth. We set up this field, and Calvin gave me some money to hire a few students. We started work. We kept it secret for a while because we were afraid of vandalism. And then the word got spread around, and we had the people that you see in this picture, Mike and Beth Vandenberg, no relationship, Paul Peterson, and Ann Albers became the foremen for a large gang of workers on any given day through the rest of the summer. We housed the Ada Bible Church Mastodon remains. My son Sam came out and worked with us for a while. Our good friends, the Vanderlucks, who are here, came out, worked with us for a while. Cal and Lori Keene came out, and their son. And so we had a lot of fun. The fellow in the right is actually a guest from Michigan State University. He was working with us for a while. This is Beth and Ann doing some of the initial surveying. We dug a trench. Here's part of the crew from the summer. This is Michelle Seitzman, a soil scientist who worked with us out there. And we had a really good time. I think we got every bit of bone out of the ground. Some of it is on display out in the hall. Some of it's in storage elsewhere. And this is not our beast, but this is the beast. Mastodon, American mastodon, Mammut americanum, a real wonder of the world. The story didn't actually end there, because a few years later, this individual, Ryan Beebe, studied the deformation in the spine. So this creature, the creature we dug up, actually walked with a limp. It had deformation, arthritic deformation, and remodeling of the bone in the lower part of its back, and would have noticeably lumbered along with a limp. We found out after the fact that that's actually not uncommon in African elephants, and that they're just very, very big animals for a very, very small vertebral sling. And so they often, so this vertebra here has been deformed by many years of bone remodeling. This thing here is an articular facet, should be over here. This is the lip of its counterpart, it should be over here, they should be paired. This has migrated over to the center of the vertebral column, taken over the entire function. So Ryan began a study of the vertebral column on this thing, and that continued into graduate school, where he studied the vertebral columns of whales. Here he is collecting in Egypt. And of course now, after a sort of a roundabout route, he's been hired back by Calvin College and is a really wonderful addition, teaching anatomy for us down in the biology department. Ryan could easily teach paleontology with me or without me, but right now he's too preoccupied with teaching anatomy for our biology colleagues. Okay. Well, just before that, Jim Clark was hired away by Wheaton College. So in God's providence, a fellow who will remain nameless from Taylor University went around the U.S., and he was going on a fishing trip to hire new faculty for a new endeavor at Taylor. He hired away the geomorphologist from Wheaton. Wheaton made Jim an offer. I told my Wheaton colleagues they would be stupid not to offer Jim the job. So Mike Giebert went to Taylor, Jim went to Wheaton, and God provided us Deanna Van Dyke. So, yeah, there's unquestionably a providential action. Okay, so Deanna, we knew that there was this woman out there in Canada somewhere, and well, she really was. She was somewhere in Alberta, I think, when we finally got hold of her. But Deanna is an expert in sand dunes. Okay, where in the world would you want to be a teacher studying sand dunes than in West Michigan? We have some of the best development of coastal dunes anywhere in the entire world. So she has a natural laboratory out here. And she began a long-term database working out of Hoffmaster State Park and some of the Ottawa County parks and other places, and involving many, many summer students. I think this is Kristen Van Clay. I'm not positive about that. This is a sediment trap, and you'll have to ask Deanna later how it works. It's really, really high tech. It's PVC pipe with a hole cut in it. Okay. Brian Ferwerda. Brian taught for us for 1 year as a guest prof. He's working in Idaho right now. Rob and Melinda. Melinda now has a PhD from the University of Illinois and is working for the Ohio Geologic Survey. This is Vashon Wright, student from Jamaica who came specifically to Calvin to study geology at a Christian institution. He's a wonderful young man. He has completed his PhD in geophysics at Southern Methodist, will undoubtedly be one of the world's experts on the tectonics of the Caribbean region, and we might see him passing through sometime in the future. This is Adam Koster. Adam got a master's at Idaho State, and he works now in a secret capacity for the U.S. government. I don't even know what he does. Okay, he interprets satellite imagery. Okay, so here's some of Deanna's students working on the beach, being trained in surveying equipment. Some of these people could possibly be here today. Deanna does a lot of her studies actually in January, when we get to see these kinds of things, and she does a lot. I've been out there with her once. They're dramatic. These are, of course, volcanoes. They're called that, ice volcanoes, and it's pretty scary getting out on them. But a lot of the actual changes that occur in the lake shoreline occur during the winter. So that's when she gets a lot of her work done. She also runs the Coastal Cleanup Day here for Calvin's participation. She runs Calvin's weather station and does a whole lot of other stuff. I think I've got her picture later on again. This is Tom Timmermans. Tom is here with us today. Tom runs an independent consulting firm here in Grand Rapids. Now bought up by another firm, but this is Tom collecting ammonites, I think in Wyoming, maybe South Dakota. And Tom has taught for us. He's taught our hydrogeology class. He's taught intro labs. He's taught a lot of things off and on for us over many, many years. So, and he was, as I mentioned earlier, he was one of the founders, initiators of the Clean Water Initiative. Kent was here as a visiting prof, taking over Dave's job in 1999-2000. Cheryl Verbrie has worked for us off and on. She's teaching right now for us, introductory geology. There's Cheryl as a student. And Cheryl has a PhD in soil science and will undoubtedly one day do a lot of work in agricultural missions. Okay. Dave Baker, who's here with us today, has taught geography for us off and on. So I'm putting these people all together because approximately in the early 2000s, that's when they get associated with us. In 2001, Calvin hired Ken Bergwerf. He was hired into the education department, but we wanted him here, so his home has been with us ever since then. And we're really thrilled now that the SCES people are all down the hall, close at hand, where we can be colleagues, good close colleagues. And Ken If you don't know Ken well, he has an astounding reputation for his teaching abilities. He works supervising student teachers in the classroom out in the world. Really wonderful working with students. He participates in our Montana program. He teaches classes in the summer. He's working with our prison initiative. And if that wasn't enough, he's the city manager for Jamestown Township as well. Okay, this is Ken's family. Well, he also, by the way, has raised multiple foster children over the years. These are some of his kids plus a couple foster kids in the picture, and not all of them are there. Okay, so this is our department as of 2001. We've now grown from 4 people to 7. We were living high on the hog. Okay. 2003, Princeton University Press published this monster book, really thick. We had a party for Dave, and I asked the Calvin caterers if they could make a volcano cake. And they said, I don't know how to do that. I said, well, just make the cake and I can decorate it, you know. And they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to make a volcano cake. I didn't realize until later what they were picturing in their minds was a 3D volcano cake. You know, I'm thinking a 2D pancake and you draw a volcano on it. With lurid red lava coming out, you know, and overwhelming towns and people in flames. At any rate, on the 3D volcano cake we had, to Dave Young, Mr. Magnanimous. Okay, our good friends, the Young Earthers, had this to say. So later on, Dave received a prize from the Geological Society of America for his work on the history of igneous petrology. I was there at the banquet at which he received the prize. He gave a nice talk about why he got interested in geology and about his Christian testimony. This is what our friend Ken Ham said. Yeah, if you know anything about the language of young Earth creationists, this is a word they love. If they don't like you, you're a compromiser, and that's like calling you a wife beater, and then this matter is settled. You can't extricate yourself, right? Compromising Christian professor receives accolades from secular world, where, there you go. I mean, we're dead in the water right there. Okay. Dave Young is professor of geological emeritus. This is online. If you Google Dave Young and Ken Ham's name together, you can come up with this. Taught for many years at Calvin College, a well-known Christian college, but sadly one that undermines the authority of Scripture to generations of students as they are taught to believe in millions of years. Well, I won't go on and belabor that. But that just goes to show that the sniping continues. There have been quotes in the Grand Rapids Press from time to time by these folks, even yet in recent years. Okay. Many of you don't know how we got the fountain, the beautiful fountain out in the hall. Jonathan Bascom actually conceived the idea, engineered the idea, got a mason, but basically the two of these guys put together the fountain one summer. It has had periodic issues with leakage, but otherwise it's been wonderful. It's hosted fish. Some of you guys know that one year the fish in the fountain vanished for a while, and then they reappeared like magic. I never saw this, but what happened was some Calvin students playing a prank turned the northwestern stairwell at not Spoolhoff Center, Heminga Hall, thank you. They turned the northwestern stairwell at Heminga Hall into an aquarium. They duct taped it all up, filled it up with water to this high, put the fish in it, and you could look through the window and see the fish swimming by. I'm sorry I missed it. They did this all in between rounds of the security guards. So it's remarkable what they did. There was some leakage, there was some damage, and they had to pay for it, but I guess it was well worth it. The fish, the fish reappeared here unharmed. So none of us knew about this till after the fact. So there's our wonderful fountain. This is a piece of wood sculpture done by Jerry Van Coten, by the way. So he's really talented at that sort of thing. Okay, speaking of whom, okay, so Jerry arrives formally 2004, although he spent a year here earlier. And Jerry was really, really kind of like suspicious because there was too much laughter going on. So Jerry said there's too much jocularity around here. And he introduced the jocularity quotient. So if the jocularity quotient kind of ramped up too high, he would say, okay, tone it down. Okay. You can see that he was the main instigator of it. This, by the way, is Mackenzie. Mackenzie occupied Jerry's office and came with him to class until regulations, safety regulations, prohibited us from having dogs on campus. Yeah, I know. As it turns out, there are actually a few people in this world that are terrified of dogs. Believe it or not. They're terrified of them, and the apprehension was that people walking down the hall would see this dog and run away. Okay? There were other people on campus whom some of you know that also brought dogs into work. Now we have therapy dogs, right? So people would actually stop in Jerry's office. It was the opposite. They'd stop in his office. They didn't know who he was. They'd stop in to pet the dog. So Mackenzie was a member of our department, as was Richard Willis, who was here as a guest prof from New Zealand. Wonderful evangelical geographer. And Hank, I apologize. I know your colleague well from the Netherlands, but his name has just dropped on me. Okay, thank you. I won't try to, but yeah. So Op was here for the whole fall. He was
here for
a few weeks.
He was here for a semester.
A semester, yeah. Okay. From the Vrije Universiteit?
No, from the University of Groningen.
Okay, thank you. There's Richard. Richard would regale us with talks about golf. It turns out that golf is very popular in New Zealand, and many towns have their own public golf courses. Interesting concept. Okay. This is Jerry. So Clarence Meniga had taught a couple of interims in Hawaii back in the 80s. Jerry helped get that started again with Dave Young's help and then some others and some others. I helped out on 2 occasions. Bascom now runs the thing. This is Jerry on Hawaii on some lava. I was with this class, so I have fond memories of all these people, and this person's here. This is Leanne DeWall Malafite. She's Norma Malafite's daughter, for those of you that know Norma. Leanne is our GEO cop. She went on to become a Michigan State Trooper. How about that? So she's doing something wonderful for all of us. Okay. All these people are wonderful. We could go on for hours. Laurie did a master's in Germany. Joel did a master's at University of Northern Arizona. John got a PhD from one of the New York schools. Megan is working as a geosteerer now, doing a lot of subsurface work. This is most recent. Some of the people are here. And Mark Bjelland is, he might have taken this picture. So, I don't think you're here, Mark, are you?
On the left, second from the left.
Okay, that's him with the hat. Right. Is that Barb next to you in the dark glasses? She looks like a spy. She's incognito. Okay. Any rate, so Mark is kind of the mastermind of that at the moment. But there's Jerry. So Jerry knows volcanology really, really well. He got his PhD in volcanology. Great, fantastic photo. Jerry's a very sanguine kind of person. He's always got his hopes up. Okay. He has been known to sit on the lips of active volcanoes in Italy and watch the lava watch the pumice come at his head. So, about the same time, we were given the opportunity of using Two Moose Lodge in southwestern Montana, and what a gift it has been. I don't have a good photo of the Gainey family, but Harvey and Annie have been just wonderful in entertaining us. They allow us to stay at this place for 2 weeks gratis. They feed us, they house us, they let us use their laundry. There's a game room, there's a basketball court, there's a softball diamond, a whole softball diamond. They let us use the whole works for free. That keeps the expense down to a minimum for our students. So we have room for 32 out there. We take them out there. Scenery is spectacular. The food is really, really good. This is Clarence actually helping out in one of the early iterations of this class.
As lab assistant.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, Jerry, this is John Schmidtkins again, who was in one of the earlier slides. The scenery is spectacular. The geology is spectacular. The things you can teach people out there head on, face on is just phenomenal. There's Jerry leading an upper level class in field mapping. Here we are at Craters of the Moon. So we take a side trip to Idaho to look at Craters of the Moon. We take a 2-day trip through Yellowstone on our way out. There's Clarence serving as field assistant. The young lady here, I'm pretty confident, is Nellie Wright, who is now serving as our department manager. And Nellie should be here, I think. Okay. And this is Nellie again. So on the left here. So this is a beautiful sunny day, a lunch stop. This is actually the lip of a crater. It's a big explosive tuff cone created when a volcanic eruption came through some water-bearing rock layers and exploded. Big steam explosion. Jerry continues to be hopeful. He's not here. Here we are looking at intensely contorted sedimentary rock. You'll notice in the backdrop, this is an intensely folded sequence here. Some of the rocks are fractured. The guy on the left who's teaching people how to fold rocks easily is Bob Spoolhoff. It can be done, but it takes concentration. You know, it's kind of like Zen sorts of things. Bob is the son, of course, of former President Bill Spoolhoff. Bob is one of the people in that picture that you saw a few minutes earlier. Became a geologist late in life and had a good living, really wonderful time. There's that picture again. So that's Bob as a younger guy. Bob taught actually for us in January. He taught a course on geology of the national parks here as a January interim, till the interim committee one year said he may not do that anymore. They were enforcing a strict curfew on outsiders teaching interims that year. We suffered. Ken Van Dalen is here. Rod Feenstra is not. More on both of them. So here's Raj helping out. Raj came out and taught with us a couple of seasons in Montana. He also taught intro geology for us. Raj worked off and on in the oil patch and as a teacher, kind of flip-flop back and forth. He taught at Unity Christian High School at the end of his career for 10 years, left, retired, and then a couple years later we twisted his arm and he came back to work for us. He was a powerful mover and shaker, as you can see. In his late 60s and when he was 70 years old, he completed his second C2C bicycle tour. Nonetheless, after that he had some serious health problems and he passed away Sunday before this last. So several of us know him here. Dear fellow, I was able to go to the visitation at LaGrave. So there's a little bit of sorrow. Okay, the third member, so here's that picture again. The third member here, Ken Van Dalen, taught for many years at Macomb Junior College. He actually had a master's degree in biology from Michigan State and a master's degree in geology from the University of Michigan. Ken and his wife Pearl created the Van Dalen Family Scholarship for a geology major. Here he is awarding it to Andrew Gelderloos a few years ago. Andrew now has got his master's degree in hydrogeology and works in New Mexico. Okay. 2006, the college finally granted us some support staff. We got it in the form of a half-timer, and this was Margene Brewer, was Marge Pott. She appears in one of those earlier pictures as a student. There she is with Clarence and Irene and Janelle, with Jerry in the background, and looks like Gloria and maybe a few of others of our staff and families. Marge is here today. Marge was a real spark plug. Marge and her husband Lance moved to Denver, and they were succeeded by Cheryl Hogewind for a couple of years. Cheryl had worked earlier at the Ecosystem Preserve. She was a good friend. And then now Nellie Anderson-Wright is here working as our departmental manager. That's sort of a combination lab manager, administrative runner of affairs, and all kinds of other things in between. Okay. Jason Van Horn arrived in 2007. Jason, of course, among other things, he's a really good computer geek, and he has established a GIS lab that is completely state-of-the-art with a dedicated server. He's done a lot of work in tandem with our IT people, and we offer Calvin students courses now, multiple courses in GIS and remote sensing that are just not to be outdone. I take a little bit of pride. Yuko Zylstra, who was here, was my dean at the time. I had to lobby Yuko for a couple of years to get Calvin to hire a faculty member in GIS. Having done so, the GIS courses at Calvin just mushroomed. And now students are waiting to get in. Okay. Jason decided that he had enough of all this sloppy stuff around here, and he needed to add more rigor to teaching in the classroom. Okay. These next couple pictures are just pictures, sample pictures of the work that he and his students have done. They've created a national atlas project for developing countries. So with his classes, he would take one country at a time. I'm not sure they're still doing this, but these are really, really significant products in and of themselves. Okay, this is a standard student project, a poster on the advance and retreat of a glacier in Alaska. You can see how the ability to superimpose lots and lots of different kinds of imagery is a really powerful analytic tool, right? So the concept of the map is a really significant one in our department. Okay, here's a political based one. Cartographer Scott Yonker, who works as a cartographer in Denver right now. So there's our expanding department with still with Janelle and with Jerry, and there's Marge Brewer in the backdrop. What a wonderful group of people. Okay, the library was doing a literacy project. They were making posters. Yeah, Kathy remembers this well. And so we insisted that part of literacy involved map literacy, and there Janelle is explaining to us that this is a continent. I was very impressed. Okay. In 2008, we then hired Jamie Skillen. Jamie knows exactly where this picture was taken. This is, I think, the Yurok Native American Reservation, right? Yeah. It's great. Okay. You didn't know that Paul Bunyan made it all the way over to the West Coast, but he did. Okay. Jamie and his backpacking clan have been wonderful additions to Calvin College. The energy supplied has been worth, I don't know, any 3 or 4 normal people. Jamie, if you didn't know it, has written to date 2 books that I know of. I think there's a 3rd and a 4th in progress. The Nation's Biggest Landlords, both published by University of Kansas Press. University of Kansas Press publishes a lot of environmental history kinds of stuff. It's a very distinguished series in this world. So these are remarkable achievements, and he has a very respected position nationwide as an environmental historian, if you didn't know that. He's also been taking Calvin classes to places like Oregon and Northern California, off and on. Here they are at Yellowstone. Along with Ryan Rooks, they've devised a DCM class in May that takes students to the Sierras. They backpack in the Sierras and talk about Christianity and environmental consciousness. So, magnificent spot for Calvin to plant its feet, huh? This is also something Jamie did. Jamie instigated our maple syrup effort, and if you come next spring quickly, you can garner maple syrup before it vanishes because it goes off the shelf like hotcakes, so to speak. Okay? Sorry. Okay. At any rate, Jamie has real ambitions to form a Calvin sugar factory. Along with Jason, they've started our bee colony, so we're interested in honey and maple syrup, and who knows what will come about in the near term. Okay. In 2011, Jonathan Bascom was given his second Fulbright Award, actually, to return to Africa. He went to Ethiopia, and then, wonder of wonders, this never happens. You have your Fulbright, you're there for a year, and then you go home. They asked him to return, and he was granted a full year. He came back for a half year, but phenomenal effort over there, and it sparked, amongst other things, I'll come back to this in a second, the beginnings of this Atlas of Ethiopia, okay, with Ethiopian colleagues, okay. Jonathan has taken students under diverse plans to Africa, diverse interims usually, January interims, some of which have been water-oriented. So here's Andrew Quackenbush. Jonathan, if you did not know, raised a missionary kid in East Africa and knows the East African world like the back of his hand. And he also knows refugee movements over there. So he's a really incredible addition to Calvin's faculty. Okay. We continued the flannel wearing trend. This is just to document that. Okay. There's a big map out in the hall that's actually a puzzle. It's a puzzle of a 1611 map by a Dutch map maker. It came in two batches. I think it's 9,000 pieces, if I remember correctly. The first batch was built in one academic year by some of these people and others. 4,500 pieces. It sat over the summer. The next academic year it was completed, and it now hangs on the wall. Henk actually gave a lecture explaining the origin of this map and what it was all about, and it was a marvel to hear. I mean, there's a lot of information and a lot of history packed in this map, and there are actually deficiencies on it, I learned. Had not realized that. If you look carefully, you can find them. I'll let you guys do that. Okay, maps continue to be really, really significant in our work of various kinds. In 2008, this book was published. This is the first cover that InterVarsity Press put on the book, and they, of course, misspelled my last name. They remedied that. But at any rate, this was an update of the book that Dave had authored back in 1982. And we've basically kept this alive. It's still in print. It's 500 pages. It's a real serious read, but I still think it was a worthwhile effort. Okay? We had a nice sort of book signing party here. Sue Felch was moderating that discussion. Dave continued to write in retirement. So he wrote this book, Good News for Science, Why Scientific Minds Need God. And he's at work on a couple more right now as we speak. Clarence Meniga authored this book, which is a very low-key revelation of the interactions that he entertained with members of the Institute for Creation Research and others like that over the years. I told Clarence he should be a little bit more vicious. He said no. That states something about Clarence. This is a really interesting book, and it's available. I think it's available on Kindle, but it can be also printed on demand. Calvin bookstores should have a couple copies. In 2013, we were blessed immensely with the establishment of the Bruce Dice Museum. This is Bruce here at the center of this. Bruce came to us a couple years earlier and said, I want to give you my mineral collection. I'm thinking, yeah, what kind of sucker does he take us for? He's going to give us a bunch of junk, and he's going to want us to take care of his junk for 200 years. Couldn't be farther from the truth. We got an incredible gift. It's been a blessing to us. About 3,000 visitors annually. The year when we had the moon rock, it was 4,000 visitors. All kinds of outreach things. Museum dedicated, 2013. It's got this cabinet of fluorescent minerals. We will go up to the reception up there afterwards, and you can enjoy these things. In the back of the room, you'll see a door. People wonder what is behind that door. Well, that's a stairwell that's used to store extra specimens. So, someday when we feel like it, we'll get some of these out of the closet, put them on display out in the hall. What people have not, what most of you do not know, very few of you would know this, is that we're extending stealthily. We're extending the stairwell downward, okay? And our hope is that eventually we will get down into the lower mantle and we'll be able to harvest diamonds.
Free tuition.
Exactly. Scholarships galore. Okay. If we keep on going, if God permits, if we keep on going, we'll hit the outer core and we'll have a supply of liquid iron that'll last us for forever. Okay. So this is actually what's going on now. Several stories down. It's getting quite hot. As any geology major can tell you, the near-surface geothermal gradient is 2 to 3 degrees Celsius per 100 meters. They should all be able to tell me that. And that means it's quite hot here. And it gives some grain of truth to the statement by the people that have been antagonistic to us over the years that if one studies geology, one draws closer and closer and closer to the fires of Gehenna. So, okay. Mark Bellender eyes. Okay. If you didn't know it, Mark is one of the co-authors, actually now the lead author, on a long-standing major textbook out there in the world on human cultural geography. So Mark is in some ways the replacement for Janelle Curry, although Mark emphasizes urban geography. So Jonathan came into part of Janelle's position, and Mark has now too. So Mark is our urban geographer, and he's taken over, actually I should say he's Hink's replacement as the urban geographer around here. This is, of course, down at the new bus terminal. Mark teaches a class in urban geography, a course devised a long time ago by Hank A. with a weekly lab where they go out and look at parts of Grand Rapids. So this is they're working their way through the bus terminal, along the river. Of course, they made the cover of the Spark in the last issue, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing for us. We have seen these sorts of publicity things over the years. So, and I've got a couple more pictures of Mark that come at the close of this presentation. Mark has also helped to spur the effort in Hawaii, so he's now sort of the lead logistics person and geographer of the group. Renee Sparks arrives. Okay, so Jerry Van Coten retires. Renee comes on board. She is now our mineralogist and igneous petrologist. This is down at Grand Ledge, if you didn't know. Okay. Renee has invigorated the outreach programs of the Dice Museum. This is Dylan Breen, a former student leading an outreach program with San Juan Diego Catholic Academy in the Dice Museum. There's the mysterious door behind them. Okay. And this is an outreach person, Allison Engelseth, at taking the show on the road, so to speak. We have now mobile collections that can be used for local area science outreach groups. Renee also instigated a field mapping class just this last May in Scotland. A real geologist's paradise. A lot of really, really famous, this is perhaps the world's, amongst geologists, this is perhaps the world's most famous outcrop. I can explain that to you later. Sicker point. Okay. More flannel. One of the coolest things to come along, we've always had, our students have always been, have had a lot of camaraderie. We've done T-shirts. We've done a lot of things together. And a formal GEO Club was founded in academic year 2016-2017. Some of the current leaders of the GEO Club are here with us today. This is on a backpacking trip, and they do a lot of really, really fun stuff together. Okay. 2017, end of the year celebration. A lot of happy people. Fall term 2017. We had to take one of these silly workplace satisfaction surveys years ago. I sat down on a Saturday and said, oh, I don't want to do this. Took about an hour and a half to complete. And as I went along, I thought, wow, that's really neat. I like that, you know, and I like my fellow colleagues, and I like our students, and I like this, and I like that. And when the results came back from the survey, to our surprise, kind of bemused surprise, we were the happiest department on campus. So when you see signs up like that, it actually has statistical validation to it. That's a happy bunch there. This is a happy bunch. This is a flannel pose just this past fall up at Sleeping Bear Dunes. This is a little later in the day at Point Betsy, watching getting splashed by the waves. Here we are back. So we're almost at the very end. We're almost at the very end of the presentation. So Mark Bieland was leading one of his urban geography field trips on this particular day. Do you remember the year, Mark? 2016? 17. 2017, when lo and behold, the Google Earth truck drove by. Is that right? I got that right? Okay, they're Street View Cam. So they're taking pictures that will go online. Okay, so here's the class saying hi. The truck passes by, and guess what's in the rear view? That's the old Calvin campus. So this is remarkable. I mean, just having these two pictures providentially supplied to us. I mean, we didn't ask for Google to come along and take our picture, right? This is remarkable. This provides kind of a nice symmetry for the talk. So we're almost done. We're back to this statement that I said I had issues with, right? So what I'd like to suggest is that it needs a little tweaking, right? That works. But, okay, it's not quite there. It's not quite there. How about that? So, we remember the maxim, we love because he first loved us. And that's where I would like to end this talk, with this fine portrait of Jamie Skillen and his pal. And you're all encouraged to go directly upstairs. So this was, I said 70 years and 70 minutes, and granting the fact that we were a little bit late getting started, came pretty close. So thank you all for coming. We will go directly upstairs and enjoy whatever it is that's coming there.